1 in 17 is pretty good odds. 1 in 4 is even better. Unfortunately, these odds refer to the number of adults in America who live with a serious mental illness such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, and the number of people who experience a mental health crisis in a given year, respectively. Statistically speaking, you likely know someone who has suffered with or is currently suffering with a behavioral health crisis or a mental illness.
As far as what is the face of mental health, I always like to answer that with you're looking at one of the faces of mental health, mental illness, recovery. I myself am in recovery from addiction as well as mental health issues.
I was in a very stressful job and trying to be the perfect mom and perfect wife, and just put a lot of pressure on myself to get things done, and just started to feel myself slowly slip away. Didn't really understand what was happening to me. No one recognized really what was going on. I eventually became psychotic.
A mental health disorder affects not only that person, but also their family members, their coworkers. And so having a community that is aware about mental health and also supports mental health efforts is really important to having a stronger community.
From a brief bout with anxiety to a lengthy journey through the darkness of a major depression, mental illness throughout America and here in St. Tammany Parish is no longer a problem in isolation, kept behind closed doors.
Close to 21% of the individuals living in Louisiana are diagnosed with any mental illness. And any mental illness is going to include major depressive disorders, anxiety, mood disorders. Whereas, we talked about before, you talked about some of the serious and persistent mental illness, like schizophrenia and bipolar. In Louisiana, we probably have our population, we're probably close to 4 to 5%. So, if you take a community like St. Tammany with a population of 240,000 and you take 20% of that, you got to figure we've got, 40,000 people just in St. Tammany who are diagnosed with any mental illness.
It's an epidemic, and we spend more time dealing with these cases than we do traffic enforcement. These are not easy cases. They take hours of a deputy's time to where he can go out and work an automobile accident in 15, 20 minutes. He's going to spend hours dealing with these individuals.
I'm scared to death. I had left my house. I need Jack to protect me. It's not my fault I'm a little different than some other people, because God made them more perfect than me. God has made us each in His own image.
Left untreated, it can cause fractures within families, self-destructive and petty criminal behavior. It can put others in danger, and ultimately it can lead to suicide.
You may lose your job. You can lose relationships with loved ones, family, wife, children. Just as any other illness that goes untreated, the biggest consequences are certainly losing your life or losing your loved one's life.
I hope nobody has to start their recovery from where I did. I actually woke up from a failed suicide attempt and realized sort of at the moment before I opened my eyes, you know how when you look at the inside of your eyelids when you're waking up in the morning? I suddenly realized while I was looking at the inside of my eyelids that my suicide attempt was unsuccessful. And in that moment, I sort of realized that everything I had done and everything I had tried in my life up to that point had failed. And I was 46 years old. And I had failed in every way that people measure success, primarily due to my illness. And it just sort of struck me that if I didn't change how I acted, what my behaviors were like, that I would simply continue to get the misery that I had lived in, particularly for those last 8 years. And I wasn't willing to do that. Obviously, death didn't bother me. I attempted to take my life. It wasn't death that scared me. What scared me was the prospect of having to go somewhere and sit in a corner for the rest of my life and drool on my collar.
Myself, and I'll even speak for my family, really struggled for about 10 years. It was a very difficult period, starting at age 16. There were real signs that my daughter was struggling, and she exhibited anger, hostility, sullen behaviors, so very, very unhappy. She was also dealing with a major medical condition at the time, and so it was real easy as a parent and as a professional to kind of dismiss it, really, and deal with the medical aspect, thinking it was related to what was going on. And also, adolescence is a very difficult period for a lot of adolescents. They are moody, they are angry, they don't like their parents, this sort of a thing. And so it was real difficult to distinguish whether this was a normal, typical adolescence rebellion going on, or if there was something a lot more serious.
An increase in suicide rates in St. Tammany Parish prompted parish officials and local mental health agencies, as well as law enforcement, to address the issue head-on. They formed a coalition between several agencies both within the parish and within the region that would work as one entity to address the spike in suicides within the parish, but which evolved into the development and direction of the care for the mentally ill or those simply suffering through a mental health crisis.
We realized that we needed to reshape and reorganize the committee and actually have an action plan and begin to develop an integrated, coordinated system of care to deliver mental health services in St. Tammany Parish. So thus, the Behavioral Health Task Force was born.
The goal of what is known as the St. Tammany Behavioral Health Task Force is to help anyone who needs it achieve mental well-being and recovery from a short-term crisis or a long-term diagnosis.
The bad news with reference to most mental illnesses, and certainly with reference to substance dependence, is that untreated, it is a chronic progressive disease that is deadly and will kill you. The good news is that it's completely treatable and easy to arrest.
The objective and the outcome with all of the work that our partners are doing and that this collaboration wishes to address is about recovery and self-sufficiency.
Often sidestepped or ignored altogether, the topic of mental illness is not something most people feel at ease discussing. But experts and laypersons agree that to ignore the mental health crisis is like ignoring any other disease that plagues society.
If your child has diabetes or anything physical, everybody knows, okay, don't give them candy, this is what's their diet, this is how you deal with it if they have a seizure, whatever. Well, it's the same thing with any type of mental illness, you want your family to be educated about it. But you need to be educated about it first, and then you can offer that kind of education to others. I think that the stigma of mental illness needs to just drop.
It is a disease, and until our medical community treats mental illness like they do heart disease, I'm afraid we're going to continue with this. But because of the efforts of our stakeholders, awareness is now being brought to it, and hopefully we can see some results.
The formation of the Behavioral Health Task Force has opened the door for discussion not only among people diagnosed with mental illness or suffering with a crisis, but also among the agencies that help these people at every stage.
The interesting part about the task force now is that we're all at the table trying to solve this issue together and create this integrated system of care, or a continuum of care, if you will. And so that's the piece that's really different and important, because everyone was working in their own silos before, and surely they would refer to one another and they knew one another, but there was never any communication taking place among them all to help solve the bigger problem that we have about what really happens to these people in a crisis, and how can we guarantee that every citizen in St. Tammany Parish who deserves high quality of care, how can they get high quality health care and help bring them to well-being and recovery, which is what each person deserves.
St. Tammany has the best coalition, I would say. They very educated people on the matter of mental health. very dedicated. I mean, when you feel like you're, somebody cares, and they also have so many resources available. They're very involved, and the stigma of mental illness, they're working to, extinguish that.
At the hub of this collaboration is the Volunteers of America, or the VOA.
Really, one of the great things about the Behavioral Health Task Force is that we're able to, we will get a client who's in need of services and refer them to the St. Tammany Parish Health Center. And we work with NAMI all the time, we work with STOPS.
With the help of parish government, about 18 months ago, we started a crisis response team through Volunteers of America. That has been a godsend.
I have some good news, and I'd like to tell you first. Be positive, think positive, and you have been a wonderful person to me, sir. God is watching over you, sir, because you are an angel sent from heaven. Call me if you can, please, so I can talk to you in person. Thank you.
The crisis response team, with volunteers from the Volunteers of America, is on call 24 hours, 7 days per week.
We went to cop school. We're not mental health professionals, but we were forced into that role. Now, with the advent of this crisis response team, all of our police officers in St. Tammany Parish carry a card in their pocket. And on that card is an emergency number only for law enforcement. So as they're en route to the scene, they can call this number. A mental health professional through Volunteers of America will arrive at the scene with them. They're the trained professionals. They know the questions to ask. They know where to get them the help that they need. And we can go back to police work. It's been a tremendous, tremendous help in our efforts to try to combat this disease.
The crisis response counselor assesses the situation, defines the need, establishes what the person and their families need, and proceeds with getting the person involved with the help that they need.
Some of the people who are involved in our program definitely have a mental illness. However, a lot of the people, all of the people who are in our program are experiencing some sort of mental health crisis. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they have been diagnosed with a mental illness. A lot of times it's, they've fallen on hard times, they're frustrated, they don't know where else to turn. And there's a suicide attempt or talk of suicide, or just feeling so overwhelmed that they're not really sure where to turn.
The crisis response team guides the person, and to an extent their families, through their crisis and offers follow-up care as well. They provide each person in the program with whatever resources they can from a case management standpoint.
To date, we've gotten 848 calls. The first year of the program, we averaged 37 calls a month, and this year we're averaging 45 calls a month. Currently, we're working with over 120 families, providing case management services for them. And of those individuals who actively participate in the case management program, none have attempted suicide again. I think if we save one life through this program, it's worth it.
The crisis response team is often the way many families learn about all of the other resources available through the Behavioral Health Task Force. For Tori Lamoth, her daughter Angèle, who was diagnosed with a borderline personality disorder when she was a preteen, became both homicidal and suicidal as she entered her teen years.
I was cooking dinner, and she came in and started an argument. It was always about something ridiculous, but it was because she was having these emotional ups and downs.
Right.
And she came in and she says, well, I'm just gonna kill myself. And she went in her room. Well, she's always made these threats. And so the next thing you know, the police were knocking at my door, and I opened the door and they said, can we come in and talk? And so I said, sure. And I said, what's this about? And they said, is there, they named her, and I went into her room and with the police officer, and she was all cut up and bleeding. So, then the fire, it was a big response. I mean, everyone came and they took her to St. Tammany Hospital emergency room for evaluation.
the Volunteers of America were able to help her daughter obtain the counseling and medication she needed, while helping her get the support she needed from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, St. Tammany chapter.
Ms. Jeannie knew to refer me to the NAMI basics and to the presentation by Dr. Colomb. The professionals know each other and know what their strengths are and what what they can handle as far as the type of disability or mental health issue. The hospitals are very aware of each other. They know what they can do and what they can't do as far as services. I've had a lot of experience with St. Tammany versus other areas that are not so, interconnected.
The best resource that I can think of is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, which is an advocacy group for people with mental illness and their families, and it is the largest advocacy group for the mentally ill in our country. And one of the things that they do is educate families, and they have a wonderful educational series called Family to Family, and that's a 12-week educational series. But in addition to that, they have support groups where a family member can go and receive support and know that they're not alone. And they also can be connected with other people if they prefer to talk about it on a one-on-one basis as opposed to a group setting, and try to get a better understanding of what it is that's happening to their loved one, what they can do to make a difference, and what the prognosis is for that person.
Going through this journey and thinking about this interview, it really brought up again the feelings, and I kept thinking, why did it take me, a professional, so long to acknowledge that something wasn't right? And I think primarily it's fear of, if I acknowledge that something's not right, then what? And I didn't have the NAMI aspect of hope and recovery. And it was only my exposure to NAMI, of receiving that and going into different groups, sticking my neck out, doing things I would not normally do. But I really learned a tremendous amount, and it gave me a new outlook that I could help my daughter, and that there is hope, and it's not something just to accept that that's the way it is.
Advocacy, education, and support are 3 pillars of NAMI St. Tammany. Services are free, and NAMI counselors do not just talk the talk. Most, if not all, have actually walked the same walk as the people who seek them out for help.
I think that probably the best way to describe that interaction is, because they know and can accept the fact that I have been where they are, the one thing that I can give them probably a little quicker than a clinician who hasn't been there is hope.
Clinically, I knew about diagnosing mental illness. Treatment I knew about, but recovery was kind of a new term. And it's the first time that people said, it's going to get better. There is hope, and there's the right treatment, the right support, not only for my daughter, but for my family. How to recapture what are the appropriate boundaries of still being the loving, kind, supportive parent, but not enabling. And that is extremely, extremely difficult.
What NAMI has helped me with is that I see myself as an asset, that I'm not broken, that even though I've changed, I think the things that I've gone through have made me a much better, stronger person, and that I have a lot more to give. I was always kind of a giving person to begin with because I was a therapist, but now I have something even more profound because I have the lived experience of having mental illness, and I'm in recovery, and I think that's a great thing. And it doesn't mean that I'll never have a problem again, but you know, I have learned through NAMI that it's possible, that there's steps to take.
The fear is walking home and finding your child not alive.
Right.
That they've attempted and successfully attempted suicide, which is, you know, I can't tell you how stressful that is. But when you have other people there for you, you know, that it makes a big difference.
NAMI works closely with the Volunteers of America to offer families of loved ones suffering with mental illness or simply experiencing a mental health crisis an avenue of relief and support.
When I got involved with NAMI and with peer-to-peer and all the other people that teach the different classes, what I saw was hope and value. People were valued, no matter where they were, you know, no matter where you are in your journey. You know, they're valued, and there's a shared experience that even though we may all be different people coming from different backgrounds, you know, and everything, we've got that shared experience, and that's what was just so wonderful.
Much like a physical illness, mental health providers, as well as those suffering from mental illness, will tell you that many symptoms of mental illness can be treated with the proper counseling and medicines, and mental illness left untreated can be devastating.
I think that when mental illness is not treated, it really tears families apart. Sorry. And I think that's what people don't realize, that you're not just dealing with one person, you know. I was a mother of 2 7-year-olds when I had my first psychotic break, and those aren't pretty. You know, psychotic breaks are not pretty. So, you know, my children have grown up with a mother with a mental illness. Now they are carrying that with them. Not only genetically do I worry about my own children, but, you know, their environment growing up was with a mother with mental illness. So, you know, when people aren't treated, when people aren't, you know, getting the help they need and good quality care, then it's affecting generations of people.
Experts will tell you that suicide, especially in the youth population, is something that can stem from many places. A traumatic event, a severe mental illness like depression, or even the suicide or loss of a friend or loved one. Many times, no apparent cause is ever pinpointed.
And I often share a picture from the mid to late 60s of a kindergarten class in Mandeville. And I tell a story about 2 kids, one named Tommy, one named Timmy. Tommy's up on the top row here in a bow tie, and that's Timmy down at the bottom. This is their kindergarten picture. Tommy and Timmy were the best of friends. They did everything together. They were probably closer than their own brothers. But what Timmy didn't realize was Tommy was fighting this gripping depression. And on Timmy's 16th birthday, Tommy committed suicide. Well, I'm Timmy. That was my best friend in the world, and I didn't have a clue. And ever since then, I've had this hole in my heart, and I think about him every day. How did I miss it? How did I not recognize the signs? How did I not know that Tommy was having this issue? Why wasn't I there to help? So ever since then, from a personal standpoint, it's been a passion of mine to try to bring awareness to those who have either contemplated or even threatened suicide in our community.
One Sunday night, I went to the movies with a girlfriend, and I came home, and I knew Ricky was agitated, and I told him we'd talk when I got home. We'd finish talking, and I found him, and he was in his room, and he was on the floor, and he had shot himself. And so I immediately, you know, called 911, and it was too late. And so that's kind of where the story began, I guess.
In fact, one U.S. study of 153 people, ages 15 to 34, 71% contemplated suicide for less than 1 hour before their attempt. When mental illness leads to thoughts of self-infliction of physical harm or self-inflicted death, another arm of the Behavioral Health Task Force is called to attention.
I have friends who, you know, they used to say, my child's acting out, and it's embarrassing. You know, and I remember one time, several years, 20 years ago, you know, when my pain was really raw, and I said, I would have given anything for Ricky to act out. He only acted out once, and unfortunately had a gun in his hand.
St. Tammany Outreach for the Prevention of Suicide, or STOPS, is dedicated to what they term prevention, intervention, and postvention.
Anytime one of my deputies is dispatched to a suicide scene, this group of volunteers will respond. And unfortunately, from law enforcement, we're worried about how the person died, the crime scene. These volunteers will come out and they will hold the family's hands. They will walk them through the process. They will let them know the steps the coroner's office takes with the autopsy, how to collect the remains, how to collect valuables. And not only, it doesn't stop there, they also provide support for them after the event.
Because the incidence of suicide can rise after a family member or close friend completes a suicide attempt, lost team members who are themselves suicide survivors step in, reach out, and follow up.
Most of us remember that when, as they're very nice, but when they're finished and they take your child's body or whoever it is, they're gone and you're just standing there. And it's like, I don't want that to happen to anybody else. You know, what do I do now? So they can call us. We give them some of us give them our phone number. We check on them. If we can't get in touch with them, we send them the information.
The loss team will respond to a scene of a suicide and assist the families on dealing with it the best they can, and with counseling and trained counselors that do respond. And it's been a big, great tool for the community to have the loss team in there.
In addition, the Survivors of Suicide Group, or SOS, meets bi-monthly with survivors of suicide to grieve and work through the trauma of losing a loved one to suicide.
These people gather on a regular basis and it's therapy for them. They share their experiences. And then the other component, of course, is the counseling that STOPS provides for these families. Because statistics show that if you have a loved one that's committed suicide, your chances of being a victim of suicide yourself dramatically increases. And they try to break that cycle.
STOPS, the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, or ASSIST, is designed to teach people how to recognize the signs of those threatening suicide. In St. Tammany Parish, law enforcement officials have benefited from ASSIST training and in turn trained many of their own officers.
1 out of 5 people in the United States are thinking about suicide at any given moment. Well, that's 5%. That's a lot. Usually we're teaching a class of about 20 people, and we're saying statistically somebody in this room is thinking about it right now. The thing is where do you cross from thinking about it to acting on it? And that's where we come in.
ASSIST emphasizes what they have termed suicide first aid, which is helping a person at risk stay safe and seek further help.
I think it's making an impact, it really is, because everyone's working together and providing the tools that they have to really assist in trying to, get the suicide rate down here in St. Tammany. So I think it's a great tool. I think it's great that everyone is coming together and working to get the rate down. So that is the key.
Over time and with resources and the right help and just perseverance, that I believe that recovery is possible and that you can feel, I do feel like myself. But there was a time when I felt like someone else, like I didn't know who I was, because I thought, well, am I the person I thought I was? I have this mental illness and I've got these behaviors and these thoughts and these things that I've done, and who am I? It was sad. It was almost like I went through a grieving process, but I actually feel like I'm a better version of myself now than I was. The more we talk about it, especially in this parish, with everything that we're doing with the outreach and with NAMI, I think it gets more mainstream and people are like, oh, okay, because I'm sorry, but people with mental illness have great gifts to offer. I mean, I think are creative, wonderful, bright people, and I think we're missing out on a lot of wonderful, talented individuals, or great, warm people, when we don't, acknowledge them or acknowledge who they are.
Mental health experts agree that education, awareness, and intervention when necessary are the tools that will help to begin the journey to recovery. For more information or for a referral, Dial 211 to speak with a trained crisis intervention or suicide prevention specialist.